Testing 1, 2, 3.
Oh, whoa, I don't want to do that. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Morristown Township Board of Education. The regular meeting of the Morristown Township Board of Education is called to order. This meeting is called in conformance with the Open Public Meetings Act with adequate notice provided as follows. Notice filed with the Courier Post on July 1st, 2021. Notice filed with the Burlington County Times on July 1st, 2021. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that due to Executive Order 251 by Governor Murphy, masks are required at all times indoors in K-12 buildings. Tonight, we're asking everyone here to please wear a mask. So thank you for that. Can I please have a moment of silence? Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Roll call vote, please. Not vote, roll call, please.
Absolutely. Dr. Alberti?
Here.
Mr. Fairchild?
Here.
Mrs. Law? Dr. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Villanueva? Mr. Weeks? Mr. Weinstein?
Present.
Ms. Romano?
Here.
Mrs. Shaw?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Moving on to routine matters. The approval of minutes for the following meetings attached. May 18th, 2021 executive session, May 18th, 2021 regular meeting, June 8th, 2021 special meeting, June 15th, 2021 executive session, June 5th, are we doing June 15th?
Those should be removed.
Okay.
June 15th, executive.
Executive too, okay.
Correct.
We are removing June 15th executive and June 15th regular meeting. June 28th, 2021 executive session and June 28th, 2021 special meeting. Can I please have a motion?
So moved, Sandra.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain from the May 18th.
Any other abstentions? Great. Any communications for the board to share? I guess not. So we will move on. I just wanted to wish everyone welcome back kind of before school starts. I hope everyone is having a relaxing summer and was able to recharge a bit, at least more so than last summer. I know our administrative team, though, including principals and teachers and all staff, have been working very hard, making sure we are ready for a full return to school in September. Thank you all for your devotion to this district during this difficult time. I don't think any of us believed we would be here again in the midst of a strong COVID surge again come this September. But we are ready for the challenge and just grateful we could bring our students back full time. There is a lot of work that still needs to be done over the next few weeks, making sure we're prepared to keep our students safe and learning in the pandemic. Also, we want to make sure that their transition back to full-time in-person will be successful. We are aware there's a lot of anxiety with students and parents now, with Delta surging again, but we be assured that we are confident. We have thought of, or the administration especially, and teachers have thought of every precaution that we can give to our schools to keep everyone safe and keep us in school. I also just wanted to give an update on the superintendent search. The job posting closes on August 30th. We do have some qualified, from I've heard from HYA, our search firm, we have some qualified candidates so far, which is good, but we still have until August 30th. And September 14th, we should have a slate of candidates for us to take a look at so the board knows. I will move right along to the superintendent's report, and they are going to do the fall forward presentation. So Dr. Fitz,
Thank you very much.
Yours.
Members of the Morristown Board of Education, parents, citizens, and all in attendance. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to work with an incredible staff here in the district in the preparation of this presentation tonight that is entitled Fall Forward Presentation. The presentation is approximately 22 minutes in duration. The presentation will focus on our internal readiness to implement a safe and healthy instructional program for staff and students. It will provide the opportunity for the continuation of a rigorous and intense educational program for students. The presentation will be done by 4 staff members: our board secretary, our director of special education, our director of human resources, inclusion, and diversity, and the director of technology and innovation. I want to tell you that I'm excited about this presentation. I've been in 2 school districts where we had to do this. I hope this presentation will answer many questions you might have. In the event you have specific questions unique to your child, do not hesitate to contact me at the office of the school superintendent for an immediate appointment to discuss your concern. I would like to welcome the presenters for the Fall Forward presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Fitz. So Jeff, can you go to the next slide, please? So we're going to get started just discussing, kind of telling you the story of ultimately where we've been throughout the summer, because things have drastically changed throughout the summer, where we started and ultimately where we're ending up here in our fall plans. So those that were in attendance at our June 15th board meeting, at that point in time, our Board of Ed was asked to approve our SRP plan, our Safe Return plan. That is a required plan under the American Rescue Plan, which gives us access to federal funding. So that plan was approved June 15th. June 18th, our school year ended, and June 28th, we started our summer programming right away. We ran 2 summer programs this year. We ran our regular ESY program, and we ran what we referred to as our ESSER 2 programming, which was additional learning acceleration funded by federal funds, ESSER 2 grants. On June 28th, we also became aware New Jersey Department of Health, in conjunction with New Jersey Department of Education, released what they're referring to as the Road Forward Guidance. Now, the Road Forward Guidance was released at that time and had a stamp on it that, number one, it supplants Executive Order 175 from the prior year, as well as last year's Department of Education plan, the Road Back. So this is the replacement guidance for both the executive order last year as well as the Road Back. July 4th is when Executive Order 175 sunset. So at that point in time, it ultimately looked like there was going to be a little bit more local flexibility in developing fall plans. Ultimately, obviously, that has since changed, which is another part of a future timeline on this. July 14th and 15th, our district administration met with the board to discuss a risk-based approach to having a mask optional strategy for our summer programming. Obviously, our summer programming, given the lower number of students, it afforded us a little bit more flexibility. What we ultimately were looking at, we were making decisions based on reviewing New Jersey Department of Health COVID-19 activity level reports, and then COVID transmission data, such as number of cases per 100,000 for Burlington County, and the rate at which that is increasing week by week, because that gives us an idea of how quick things are escalating. In a future slide, we'll look at that a little bit more, and actually it's the next slide, and you'll ultimately see that curve there. July 29th, our summer programming ended. At that point in time, our administrative staff participated in a pandemic briefing with Dr. David Rubin from CHOP Policy Lab, Director of CHOP Policy Lab, Dr. Tanya Altman, and Dr. Adriana Bravo. To ultimately, it was a briefing that's given to schools across multiple states to discuss some mask optional strategies and ultimately layers of protection mitigation strategies. So can you go to the next slide, Jeff, please? So the next slide is specifically from CDC, from their online data tracker. So looking at it, it's ultimately looking at a 7-day moving average for total cases per 100,000. When we were discussing these plans in July, you can see that that curve was relatively low. Burlington County had a low number of total cases per 100,000. That has since escalated. For example, July 20th, Burlington County was averaging roughly 19 to 20 new cases per week. Fast forward to August 15th, it's now at roughly 100 new cases per week. So this is definitely going up. This is definitely growing. For comparison, we're starting to come up to what we saw when we returned from spring break last year, levels of total cases per 100,000, similar to when we returned from spring break. Jeff, can you go to the next slide, please? So this actually coincides what we saw internally to our district as well. August 2nd, we communicated with the community that we had now had 5 positive cases in our summer programming. That was without going mask optional, which resulted in 22 students being quarantined. That same date, August 2nd, was the final day to respond to the community survey that we put out regarding masking protocols. On August 3rd, our district administration met with Dr. David Rubin individually on a virtual meeting. Our school nurses, our principals, board leadership, our MEA leadership, and our MA leadership were all in attendance at that meeting to ultimately discuss mask optional strategies and risk mitigation layers of protection that we have put in place. On August 4th, we met with Strauss Esme, because Strauss Esme, last year, some of you may be aware, we had policy 1648, 164802, 164803. They're on for abolishment tonight to be replaced by 164811. That policy was constructed based on the road forward guidance from New Jersey Department of Education, New Jersey Department of Health, ultimately. August 7th, the governor obviously announces the Executive Order 251 that masks will be required for all students, staff, and visitors while inside school buildings. August 12th, our district administration met with board curriculum and policy committees to discuss Executive Order 251, its impact on our fall plans, and policy 164811, which we'll be asking the board to approve tonight. We also participated in another pandemic briefing that day with Dr. Rubin, Dr. Altman, and Dr. Bravo. Can you go to the next slide, Jeff? So our community survey results. Ultimately, our survey resulted in a total of 2,410 responses, which was roughly 63% of our overall student population. Of those responses, we looked at that data, PK, preschool through 12, and then we took a look preschool through 6, because preschool through 6 does not have the vaccination available to them just yet. So we wanted to take a look to see if our community had different thoughts between vaccination status that way as well. Ultimately, pre-K through 12, 45.1% of the community wanted an option to masking. 54.9% of the community wanted some sort of requirement to masking. Preschool through 6, when you looked at that further, Jeff, can you go to the next slide, please? When we looked at that further, it indicated that 42.7% of preschool through grade 6 wanted an option to masking, and 57.3% of the community wanted a requirement or some sort of requirement to masking, whether it's unvaccinated or all students. So can you go to the next slide there, Jeff? Thank you. So ultimately, our fall forward plan, we have multiple layers of protection in the plan, some of which we've learned last year from. We did a lot of things very well last year. Those things are still in place for this plan. The first is symptom screening. Parents will be requested to monitor their child's symptoms. Nurses will assist with symptomatic screening during the school day. Pursuant to Executive Order 251, masks will be mandated while indoors. Physical distancing will be utilized where appropriate. Classroom cohorting for lunches will be utilized at K to 6 levels. Sanitizing stations are available throughout district buildings. Cleaning and disinfecting procedures exist. We have checklists that exist with detailed cleaning procedures. We utilize misters and sprayers for deep cleaning procedures, and we have frequent disinfection during the school day of high contact touch points. Hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette will be promoted via signage and informing students and staff. Our HVAC, we took a hard look at our HVAC systems last summer and this summer in conjunction with utilizing ASHRAE recommendations. We've ultimately made upgrades to our filtration system. We've used enhanced filtration in the sense of we've upgraded to MERV 13 filters where appropriate. We run air purges prior to the start of the school day and during the school day to bring in fresh air and turn over air and have additional air exchanges. We made control modifications last year. We added CO2 sensors where appropriate to assist where CO2 reaches a certain level and the HVAC system automatically triggers to turn over the air and bring in fresh air. We have coil cleaning procedures utilizing EPA list N disinfectants, which ultimately, when we have a positive student or a positive case, we go into those classrooms, purge the air right away, and then change the filters, clean the coils. And then ultimately, we have our contact tracing and exclusion criteria as defined by CDC and New Jersey Department of Health. I know our school nurses participated in a meeting with the Department of Health today to specifically talk about that criteria. We've been awaiting an update on that, so more to come on that. And Dr. Tate will speak about that in a further slide. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Tate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heiser. Just some more details now regarding the actual school day. When we return in September, we are committed to a full day, 5-day per week in-person learning situation. And the school time, the school day will be just like it had been prior to COVID. So you can see the times up there, lower elementary starting at 8:40 and dismissing at 3:35, and you can follow it right down to the high school start and end times. So that is where we will be when we begin school in September. Jeff, can you go to the next slide? Okay, transportation. So pursuant to the CDC, masks are required on the bus. Physical distancing, we will put that in place where practicable. We will sanitize the bus in between routes, and that we will have assigned seating for contact tracing. It's something that we learned last year, so we'll have that right from the get-go this year. Jeff? Okay, lunch and recess. So due to a USDA waiver, I wanted to just mention that meals will be free for all students again this year, regardless of eligibility. In the cafeterias, physical distancing will be 3 feet. Additional lunch periods, we're able to accomplish that in different ways in different schools. So additional lunch periods to accommodate physical distancing, additional spaces with dedicated HVAC, enhanced things, things that Mr. Heiser was just speaking about, enhanced filtration and high exchange rates. And we will be sanitizing surfaces frequently touched areas. Recess will be outdoors. When it is outdoors, will be mask optional. There'll be hand sanitizing stations available upon entry and exit. Yeah. Okay, so mask breaks. Mask breaks will be provided throughout the school day, and that also includes lunchtime, recess, anytime there's aerobic activity or physical education, as well as outdoor activities. Okay, another important slide, speaking about quarantine. So the district will utilize New Jersey Department of Health and CDC exclusion criteria, and contact tracing will be performed in conjunction with the Burlington County Health Department, as it had been last year. Now, the good news that I want to report is that I did speak to the nurses. Their meeting ended probably about 5 o'clock or a little after 5 o'clock. One piece of information that I do have is that instead of 6 feet, when you are doing close contacts, last year, we would go as far out as 6 feet, and anyone within 6 feet for 15 minutes would have to quarantine. This year, if students are in a classroom at least 3 feet apart and they are if they are all masked and they are all facing the same direction, we only need to go out 3 feet. So that I think is going to be a huge deal for us. And I am very happy to get that information today confirmed by the Burlington County Health Department. At any rate, supporting instruction for students who are quarantined. Additional classroom technology has been added during the summer at the K-3 levels to allow for synchronous instruction. Students pre-K through 12 will be invited to participate via Zoom or Google Meet when they have to quarantine. Paraprofessionals will assist quarantine students when necessary. Jeff? Okay, and I am going to pass it on now to Ms. Butler.
You didn't pass it on. All right. Almost finished here. Social and emotional academic support. We are very lucky this year. We've planned the calendar, obviously with last year in mind, to put the first 3 days for the teachers and our support staff in September. And so for those first 3 days, we use them as professional development days, get our staff back acclimated to their buildings. Our supervisors and the director of curriculum and instruction is working with our teachers on the first 3 days. They're going to discuss with the staff about examining what they've gained of knowledge during this pandemic through the assessment model lens. They're going to create an open and caring environment where students are seen and heard, making sure that's purposeful. We're going to address trauma-sensitive environments through discussions, being aware of experiences students and our teachers may have had during this past year. They're going to construct their spaces. Dr. Tate just talked about having everyone face forward. That is not typical in a typical school year. We like to get the kids close, working in groups and pairs. We're going to look at our spaces within our classrooms and try to construct them in the best way possible that's culturally responsive in that teaching and learning. We're also going to assess our student needs with the proper scaffolding and formative assessments, providing daily engagement activities with context in grade level concepts. So they're going to be working, our supervisors will be working with the teachers to kind of review that in their curriculum come September. Jeff, next slide. Also, we've not left out the parents in the community. We have partnered with the Courage and Wellness Therapy based out of Morristown to offer some parent series. We'll be sending out those dates shortly for you to put on your calendar. We'll be exploring vulnerability, courage, shame, and developing resilient skills for parents. And any community member, you don't have to be a member of Morristown Schools to attend. We're also, all of our principals have invited any new student to the district or students that were on full remote last year back into the building this summer for an open house. They should have received that invitation so they can come in, see the buildings, meet the teachers or principals who's around, get a feel and sense for what's going to be coming across their way come September 8th. The principals will continue to work with their staff to identify individual student challenges and provide the specific support that is needed. Mr. Heiser also mentioned about ESSER funding. It was funding that we received from the federal government. As you know, the board has helped allow us to hire a psychologist for the school year to focus in on, who's dedicated to mental health. And that person is going to work with not only our students, but families that we have in the district that may be impacted by COVID. So I hope you hear in the last 2 slides that we're trying to holistically look at our student population, our parent population, and prepare ourselves for moving ourselves forward, hopefully out of this pandemic era and making that part of our past, but still staying focused on our curriculum and the excellence that we have here in Morristown. I think that's it. Dr. Fitz?
Thank you very much. But let me express an appreciation to the staff and to all the contributors. I was looking at the data the other day to see the number of contributors. They are up in the hundreds. When you look at the number of people participated in Zoom meetings with us, various legal departments, our own legal departments that work with us to help us get us to this point. I'd like to thank you for a great presentation. And now, board, I open it up for any questions from you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Fitz, and thank you all for the great presentation. I know, as Dr. Fitz said, there were many, many hours of meetings, even though this looked so perfect and quick, relatively quick. I know there were many, many hours and meetings put to this. So thank you all for that effort. I have a couple of questions to start with, and then I'll open up. If Mark, did you have one? Okay, thanks. In terms of, do we have any indication that any of the quarantining rules will be changing at all? Or will we be following what we did last spring, I guess it was? Does Dr. say great?
Okay, yeah, thank you. There is maybe. We're waiting on some more information coming out from the Burlington County Health Department. There seems to be more choice for the school district this year, but the 5 to 7 day quarantine situation for people who are close contacts seems to be the standard right now. So if you have to go in isolation because you have COVID, you'll miss 10 days. You'll be quarantined. You'll be in isolation for 10 days. So it seems like some of it will remain the same, and there may be some flexibility in the other areas. When we get that information, then we'll make some decisions about that.
Okay, perfect. So any new information will be shared with us. And then I guess any of the quarantining, is that currently on our website as is?
So the last update that we did is still accurate, but we are working on redoing the information on the website. So we will have more information, more detailed information regarding COVID and all those protocols over the next couple of weeks.
Great, thank you so much. One other quick question. I know we had talked a little bit about in some committees, are we having the screening form that parents have to fill out each day, or?
Oh, geez, sorry. Mask, I wasn't sure how to go. No, we are not going to do that. We're going to be
Okay.
sending out information to parents weekly to remind them to self-check at home and self-monitor for their children. We'll give them guidelines and expectations of when or when not to send children in. But we are going to ask the help of the public and the parents to make sure that they're assessing their children before they are dropped off at school.
Perfect, thank you. That's where I thought we landed on it, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. So thank you both. Any board members? Mark, do you want to go?
Yeah, I had a question specific to mass breaks. Is that going to be set at the building level? Is that more of a teacher-specific choice? And then I guess, is there a ratio of time that you're thinking about in terms of implementing during the day?
We had a great discussion about that today, a very lengthy discussion about that today. And what we're asking is administrative from cabinet level, superintendent. We're meeting with our principals to have that. We've actually had that discussion already with them. And then we're going to ask the principals to have that discussion in their buildings, because we feel like a district-wide explanation of every mass break every 20 minutes, 15 minutes is too much, depending on what level that you're in. So we're asking for them to be frequent. We're asking them to follow the guidelines that we have set up in the presentation as far as outside. If children need a mass break, they're going to communicate that with your teachers. Let the teachers work it within themselves to do that. But there is an expectation district-wide that we're offering mass breaks consistently for our kids.
Okay, but they'll be set more at that building level, you're anticipating?
Yes, at the building level.
And my other question was, just to clarify, so lunches for students that have recess, when you say lunches are like cohorted, the classes would stay together and not mingle with other classes during recess after lunch. I'm just clarifying, I think.
There may be some mingling outside, but not during the lunchtime.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have some additional questions around the lunch periods. Is there a protocol about how early in the day we're going to have lunch, or how late in the day?
So not a protocol. The high school has had to add additional 3. They used to have 3 lunch periods, and now it's 5 lunch periods in order to expand their schedule. So there is an early lunch and a late lunch at the high school level, based on, in order to accommodate the number of students that need to eat lunch during the day and the size of our facility to accommodate that with distance. They're the only one that had to go that early. Everyone else was able to maintain their area. One of our other elementary schools is getting pretty creative on how to do it because they've got a small cafeteria. But for the most part, it's right now only really impacting the high school to extend the lunch periods.
Just,
The high school is the only high school that, see, I got to figure out my volume size here, sorry. The high school is the only school that had to expand lunch periods, so there's 5 now lunch periods at the high school level. There is one elementary school that is trying to get real creative as far as offering lunches because of a small size cafeteria. But for the most part, the high school is the only one that had to expand the earlier start and later start of lunch because of the class sizes and the number of, the size of the cafeteria.
Carol, that took into account all the seniors that have privilege both early and late?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, I don't believe, for play, I'm not sure if for playtime, they'll be able to stay in their cohorts, they'll be outside, amongst themselves outside, running around. Correct, but in the cohorts at lunchtime, they'll be in their cohorts at lunchtime. Sitting at the same seat at the same time, they'll be at their same locations. Correct.
Any other questions from board members? Nope, I guess not. Okay, great. Thank you so much again for all the work on this forward presentation. I know you have a lot of additional work ahead to get things ready for school and our students to come back, which we are excited for. So moving on to our board committee reports. Mark Snyder, you want to start with curriculum?
Sure. I think everybody can hear me. So we met on August 12th. In attendance were Karen Benton, Dr. Fitz, Jeff Airy, Sandra Rudy, Mick Weeks, Lauren Romano, myself, Dave Tate, James Heiser, and Kat DeAmbra. Obviously, the first part of the discussion was about what you just saw there in the context of the Fall Forward Health and Safety Plan. Then we talked about the summer programming that had just wrapped up. So 303 students were invited to the summer engagement program, and 222 attended. It was very well received. The teachers involved were very excited with how it went. A more formal feedback, and once the teachers come back and we're able to sort of ascertain the things that worked and didn't, will be forthcoming. The things that they pointed out that were really exciting were obviously the teacher to student ratio, the flexibility in the way the day was structured, and it was half ELA, half math. Not that the other ESY and supplemental reading and math doesn't have similar flexibility, but it went very well. There was about 100 students that were in traditional ESY, which also went very, very well. The district PD that will be upcoming, we talked about, so the main thrust will be the diversity and inclusion. There is a number of offerings that respond specific to culturally responsive teaching and leading. The administration has a culturally responsive leadership that their PD series that they're partaking in on 9/2 so the 2nd of September. There's a keynote speaker speaking to that in that first week before students come, and the high school deed committee is leading a number of staff discussions on that as well. One of the things that we talked about a lot in the context of sort of moving forward with the 21-22 school year was how to frame, and this obviously comes from the new Director of Curriculum Instruction and Innovation, the broad goals that she's looking to sort of implement. Obviously, predominantly assessing and addressing the readiness to learn. So again, her focus, not simply the academic side, but just the developmental appropriateness and the social emotional readiness to sort of get back in the classroom and get going. Obviously, one of the other goals dealing with culturally responsive and engaging instruction, and sort of looking at the continuum of the curriculum and not trying to go back, but simply moving in the direction that the curriculum is going, and not and not sort of, again, within the context of, especially for the younger kids, focusing on what needs to happen this year, and with the additional resources, how she can do that. We talked about the use and the utility of the MAP testing for this year. So a similar structure. It'll be fall and spring for students grades 1 to 7, and kindergarten will get winter, and there'll be an additional administration in the winter for students with basic skill students and students who are involved in the special ed program. But having clear goals for the utility of the data that we get. So trying to get a baseline for instruction, to track growth from year to year, all the things that we usually use MAP for. But I think it's heightened in light of the past year and a half to sort of really put a finger on sort of where students need more support in various contexts. The Start Strong assessment, which will be implemented in the fall as well. On August 26th, there'll be a New Jersey Department of Ed meeting. So that will be further information about how that will be administered and exactly what parameters that will have. And we talked about how there'll be a further, not influence, but stress on having department and grade level supervisors assist those various groups of teachers in sort of looking at the curriculum and understanding how it might need to change this year in various contexts for lots of reasonable reasons. We talked about the instructional to technology and how early device pickup is the 27th, 30th, and the 31st. As you already saw, we talked about how there'll be additional monitors in the K-3 buildings that will help those teachers connect and teach the students who are on quarantine so that they'll be able to teach the students in the classroom. And in the unfortunate event that students have to quarantine, that will be available to them. And we talked about the student wellness that was kind of alluded to for students at the various levels and what will be afforded to them. So at the K-3, the sort of morning meeting structure will be maintained, and students will, similarly connect with teachers, with their teacher and their peers in the same sort of way, using counselors as, push-ins, that kind of thing. 4 to 6 will still have extended homeroom, and they'll use the similar sort of character strong approach that they used last year. WAMS has Quaker Time, which they'll have 4 to 6 times a year. The high school has a number of programs like Chill and Chat, Truth Talks, Fun Fridays, and the Parent Academy that was just described. So that obviously, Kat Amber spoke to that specifically, trying to make sure that all the students at the various levels were accounted for in specifically, again, that emotional readiness to return to school. And the last thing we think, just to make sure that the K-8 ELA pilot is still ongoing, that it remains on schedule for this year, which it is. So K-5, I apologize. K-5, piloting 25%, and then a year later, the other 75% will have a new ELA program. Any questions from the board?
Any questions for Mark? I guess not. Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
David, do you want to do F&O?
Sure, happy to. So F&O, let's get this a little closer, sorry. F&O met on July 28th in attendance for myself, Mark Villanueva, Karen Shaw, Mick Weeks, Bill Hurley, Carol Butler, James Heiser, Jeff Airy, Dr. Fitz, and Dr. Tate. First, we discussed our janitorial contract that we have entered into for this coming year, just kind of getting a status update as to where they are. At the time, staffing was moving in the right direction. They were going to be near full staffed within the next couple weeks. All the employees that were working at the school at that point in time had completed the background checks that are required before they start. There was some employees who had not yet come on yet because they were still waiting on their background checks to come through. We discussed the fact that the new employees were receiving at least $15 an hour for their wages that were coming on, which was an improvement from what they were receiving before. And that the new provider is in 48 states, which allows for some growth and movement internally. for their employees if they wish to move elsewhere or go elsewhere in other parts of the country, and that there had been some move over from our prior provider to the new provider of some of the existing employees that were at the Morristown schools. We then went on to talk about Chapter 44 and some of our non-affiliated members and how it was impacting them, and the potential need that we may have as a district to address those inequities. And a discussion went around that, and we are waiting on a recommendation as to how we're going to move forward. We then had a discussion regarding an RFP to go out for a negotiator. It was reviewed by the committee, and it looks like that RFP is going out, and we're looking to try to move forward with having a negotiator in place for our negotiations with the MEA in place by the beginning of the school year or shortly thereafter, so we'll be able to start when they are ready. We discussed our paraprofessional needs. We discussed the fact that there'll be we need new one-to-one paraprofessionals due to some new move-ins from students that have need for a one-to-one paraprofessional. Also, we've had some impact, as you would expect, from COVID this past year, from homebound students and other things that just impact how our paraprofessionals are in need. Unfortunately, these were unbudgeted. We don't always have the ability to know who's going to move in and what their needs are going to be. So we do have some anticipated cushion within our budgets, but we can't anticipate exactly how many move-ins we may have that are in need of different types of services. We then discussed an IDEA grant that was made, and the submission is actually on this agenda. It still is, correct? So we'll be reviewing that later. And then we had regarding, I'm just making sure it's part of it, went into some of the disciplinary issues that are trying to be addressed at the IDEA grant, and some of the issues that are associated with some of the various inequities within our district, and how the grant will help us try to address some of the inequities within the district itself. We discussed the overnight trip that's going to be for the cheerleading, which I believe is still going to be going, which is good news. We're going to be using our in-house busing for that, and there was a recommendation from the committee that that be approved. And then we had a COVID-19 update, which was part of the presentation earlier, so I'm not going to go into that because you already heard that from Mr. Heiser. That's the end of the report.
Thanks, David. Any questions for David? Nope. Great. Jack, policy?
So policy met on August 12th. It was Mr. Heiser, Dr. Tate, Ms. Butler, Dr. Fitz, Mr. Villanueva, Ms. Shaw, Mr. Weinstein, and myself. The entire meeting was spent discussing policy 1648.11, the road forward. This policy will take place and abolish 1648, 1648.02, and 1648.03. We really discussed most of the things you've seen in the presentation here. I'll just highlight a couple. We talked about providing a link to the health department criteria for quarantine. We discussed policy around mask breaks and the difficulty creating a district-wide policy. We discussed what quarantine would look like, synchronous instruction for all students in quarantine, and like all things COVID, this policy is probably going to change as we move forward here. But at this time, it provides the administration the tools they need to open safely. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. Any questions? Great. I think we've all been through it a few times. Communications did not meet. Drea was the chair of the communications committee, so we will meet again. Lauren and Mick will join the communications committee, so we will probably set up a meeting soon. I did want to let committee chairs know that if you do want, right now the meetings are starting in September, but if you do feel you need an August meeting, please feel free to set one up. Additionally, I don't know if the committee chairs and the committees have decided whether you want your meetings virtual or in person, so please have those discussions with your committees to make that decision. Sandra, I don't know if we have anything for ad hoc.
No, I'm going to meet with Dr. Benton and with Carol and Dr. Fitz as the school year kicks off to do the launch of the committee for
Perfect.
anti-racism.
That sounds great. Any off-board committee reports? Guess not. Okay, moving on to public comment. A motion is requested to open the floor for public comment.
So moved. David.
Second.
Okay, I think we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This is public comment on agenda items. Please come up to the mic, state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes to speak. As you know, this isn't necessarily a question and answer period, and it's always best to follow up with an email. As Dr. Fitz said, he's very happy to receive your emails and set up some time to answer any questions. Please be respectful when making public comment. We, as an educational community, set appropriate expectations for our students and serve as role models. So please state your name and address.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Luis Orozco y gracias por la oportunidad de dar mi testimonio hoy. He trabajado aquí durante los últimos 6 o 7 años aproximadamente. Cuando laboraba aquí ganaba 15.50.
Good night. My name is Luis Orozco. I work for Morris Town District for 7 years.
Trabajé durante la pandemia y nunca nos detuvimos. El 28 de junio esta junta decidió otorgar el contrato de limpieza dejando a 28 personas sin trabajo de un día para otro.
I worked through the pandemic and never stopped. On June 28, this board decided to award the district cleaning contract to HCSG, effectively leaving 28 people without work.
De un día para otro, no solo perdimos nuestros ingresos, sino también nuestro seguro médico, apoyo legal y otros beneficios.
From one day to the next, we not only lost our income, but also our health insurance, legal support, and other benefits.
Intentamos solicitar empleo en la nueva empresa, pero nos dijeron que ya tenía su propia gente y no podían ofrecernos puestos en la escuela.
We tried to apply for jobs with a new company, but they told us they had their own people and couldn't not offer us position in the school.
Cuando perdí mi trabajo, estaba en el proceso de patrocinar a mi esposa se uniera a mí en los Estados Unidos. Este proceso ha tenido que ser detenido por dos razones muy importantes. El abogado que me ayuda con el proceso es parte del servicio legal que nos provee el sindicato. Es necesario poder comprobar que uno puede mantener económicamente al beneficiario y ahora no tengo trabajo.
Before I came to US, I was studying accounting and financial. I understand the need for the school board to save money. It is terrible to these savings are being made on the back of the workers. Practically, when it's Morristown, one of the most affluent districts in the state.
Es importante que comprendan cómo su decisión ha afectado nuestras vidas. Gracias.
When I lost my job, I was in the process petitioning my wife to join me in the US. That process has been held for 2 very important reasons. The lawyer assisted me with, it is important that you understand how your decision has affected our lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas noches. Buenas noches. Gracias por la oportunidad de estar aquí. Mi nombre es Luz Ortega, tengo 37 años y estoy embarazada.
Good evening. My name is Luz Ortega. I'm 37 years old and I'm pregnant.
Tengo 5 meses. He trabajado durante 15 años en este distrito. Tengo 8 años en William Middle School.
I'm 5 months pregnant, and I work in Morristown District from the past 15 years, 8 of those at William Allen Middle School.
Yo trabajaba en la noche de turno, era líder. El 1 de julio, alguien llamado Jeff vino hacia mí y me dijo, estoy en la junta escolar y me pidió me pidió que le diera la llave y la di.
On July 1st, someone by the name Jeffrey came to me, told me he has with the school board and request I give him all the keys. He then notified us that we no longer had a job at the school.
Estoy segura de que comprenderán mi angustia. Me di cuenta que no tenía trabajo ni seguro médico. Pero estar embarazada es devastador porque ahora no podré volver al médico porque no tengo seguro. Es difícil para mí conseguir trabajo estando embarazada.
I am sure you can understand my anguish when I realize that I will not only have lost my job, but also my health insurance. Under normal circumstances, that will be difficult for anyone, but because I'm pregnant, it's devastating. I will not be able to go back to my doctor because there is no way I will be able to afford medical care without health insurance.
Estoy decepcionada y desilusionada de la forma en que la Junta Escolar nos ha tratado. Uno pensaría que trabajar en este distrito escolar de Morristown durante 15 años significa algo, pero claramente no ha sido así. Gracias.
I am disappointed and disillusioned at how we have been treated by the board. You will think that working for Morristown School District for over 15 years will mean something, but it clearly does not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Just like to address a few things. Going into this school year, we ultimately put out a bid for a new janitorial company, not necessarily a new janitorial company, but every 2 years, we have to redo our bid process for our current contractor. We put out that bid, our prior contractor, ABM, did not bid on that contract. We had 4 bids. The lowest was roughly 1.1 million. The next lowest was roughly 1.3 million. Then the next was 1.7, 1.8, and then all the way up to 2 million. So 1.7 and 2 million were out of our budget compared to the prior contractor. Obviously, we totally understand your concerns and completely understand where you're at on that. We welcome your conversations with the current vendor, but that's also part of the reason why we ultimately subcontract with a vendor. So we welcome those conversations, but there is a process to the bid process by state law that we have to follow. The lowest responsive bidder is required to be awarded by us unless they are disqualified for a reason.
Thank you, James. And again, the ABM, who was it? They did not even put in a bid. So unfortunately, that was the situation, and we do feel awful, but we're welcome the conversation. And I know our new vendor was welcoming, people to apply for their
Hi, good evening. My name is Elena Lavaretta, and I'm the political director for the union that represents the workers here. We've asked for a conversation with the school board to have a deeper discussion. We don't want to take up everyone's night. We know that you're talking about other important issues, including the masks, and how kids are going to be safe in the fall. And we recognize that as equally as important as the issues that we're bringing here today. We would welcome an opportunity to sit down and talk details, but there are other school districts. We don't represent just these cleaners who work in this school district. We represent school cleaners throughout the state, and there are districts that put in wage and benefit standards into their solicitation so that you don't, because without that, right, you're encouraging a race to the bottom. You're saying, vendors, this is, there are no standards, just put in your bid, and then we're going to go with the lowest responsible and responsive. But South Orange Maplewood puts in language that says you have to pay this wage rate and you have to pay this benefit rate, because otherwise we end up with a situation like this. Workers who've worked for 15 years in the district, who are pregnant and reliant on their health care, there's no other option. And unfortunately, the folks that were brought in, HCSG, they don't offer a comprehensive healthcare plan. Their ACA compliant healthcare plan, we had our health funds who they look at hundreds of healthcare plans from all of the contractors that we work with to determine, is this ACA compliant? What is actually going on here? There's no comprehensive plan. For a hospital stay, the deductible is $6,500. If you are pregnant and going to have a baby, you do that in a hospital, generally speaking. People who are making $15 an hour, a few cents above, they cannot afford that. We are sympathetic, as we shared in the testimony, we are sympathetic to the fact that there are lots of costs that a school board needs to consider. However, cutting costs on the backs of the lowest paid workers in the district who have been with those school districts for 7 years, 15 years, who have been loyal, who had all of the keys to the district, that's not the way to do it. And we know that this is true because we know other school districts don't. There are other options here. We've asked for conversations. We want to solve this problem. We don't want it to be a headache for you. We don't want it to be a problem for these folks. Please sit down with us. We want to find a solution. We have tons of creative solutions because we've been in this situation before. Will you take a meeting with us?
I can certainly reach out to you tomorrow if you leave your email for me.
Yep, I'll leave my card before we go.
Just to clarify though, our bid specifications do include minimum rates of $14 an hour for a Black Seal license and $20.50 for a site supervisor.
$14 an hour, that's not a healthcare floor. So now folks are, and not to mention, and we did include this in our communication outreach to you, but the workers tried to apply for those jobs, which they were told by HCSG, and I know they told you all that the workers would be given the opportunity to apply for the jobs. However, that is not actually what happened, and so now there is a federal investigation by the National Labor Relations Board looking into the fact that these workers were discriminated against when they went to actually apply for those jobs. So let's say you're in the position here, right, and you say, okay, I need a job. I'm willing to accept no health care. I'm willing to accept, I'm willing to accept no health care. I'm willing to accept that, I'll just wrap up with this. I'm willing to accept no health care. I'm willing to accept, that this is not going to be as good of a job. They tried in earnest to apply and they were discriminated against. And there is an open federal investigation into that.
Okay. If you want to leave your email, I'm sure Mr. Heiser will follow up with you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Anyone else have, please feel free to go to the mic.
Hi, Claudine Leone, 425 Oldershaw Avenue. Karen, I appreciate you mentioning the website with respect to the nurses and Dr. Tate putting the contact tracing and quarantining on there. I think it will save a lot of phone calls and confusion from the community. Dr. Tate, I know they just met with the school nurses just met today. I want to just get some clarification. I know Department of Health is likely going to publish new contact tracing and quarantining requirements, and hopefully the nurses were briefed. It's my understanding that the CDC is making a special exception on how to define a contact traced person for K through 12. And if they're wearing masks and they're wearing them properly, then there really is no contact tracing to be had. So it's not like within 3 or within 6, it's just the kids shouldn't be considered a close contact. That doesn't speak to buses, and it doesn't apply to the adults in the room. So I think there's going to need to be some real kind of clear education for, the community on that. My other question is, because quarantining doesn't apply to vaccinated individuals at this point, and even if they change at some level, I don't think it'll involve quarantining. I think it'll involve maybe testing, in a matter of days. I'm surprised, having a 14-year-old, that the district hasn't asked for our vaccination status. I'm not talking about mandatory vaccines. I'm not talking about any of that, but the nurses are going to need to know who's vaccinated and not in order to make those close contact determinations and quarantine determinations. So my question is, you don't have to answer it now, but are you looking at asking the community, to submit that, just like we did with any other vaccines, at younger ages? And are you collecting that information from the staff?
We actually do have access to the information. The nurses do anyway. So we have information to the database that has the information of the students who are vaccinated. Yes.
Okay, and the same that goes for staff and students.
It is for the students, but we've asked the staff. We've done a survey internally for ourselves.
Okay. But if the nurses have access to the statewide database, they should have access to everybody. All right, thank you.
Hi, Jill Fallows, Macaluso, 800 Golfview Road. Thanks for the information shared in the plan this evening. I think it was a big step forward from previous BOE meetings. The parent communities asked for more transparency and greater detail. So I just want to say that we truly appreciate that, or at least I do. I do think when it comes to those couple of big buckets like quarantine, contact tracing, mask breaks, it's important that we have those top-down standards. While I appreciate the level of detail shared tonight, it would be very helpful if we look to some other schools and their best practices have been to publish those clear top-down standards for the parent community. I think it would create greater efficiency, cut down on confusion, cut down on frustration, and also ultimately cut down on parent divide in the parent community, because sometimes we have differing points of view on things that it seems like you've given a lot of thought to. So I would really appreciate those clear top-down standards in a published way that could be easily accessed by the parent community. I'd also like to echo what the previous speaker said around the K-12 in-classroom exception for quarantining. At least as I understand it, based on the CDC read, if the students are wearing a mask, that is the physical barrier and the number of feet isn't at issue. So I think it would be important to clarify that exception in the CDC guidance. And last but not least, I appreciate that you have access to which students are and aren't vaccinated for contact tracing and quarantining. But I think it would also be helpful if the parent community could understand not who is and isn't vaccinated from a staff standpoint, but could you share percentages of vaccinated staff and in particular teachers? Because it does, since that K-12 exception that we're talking about for in-classroom contact tracing and quarantining does not apply to adults. My worry is that if there's a large number of unvaccinated staff and teachers, that it may impact resourcing if teachers need to quarantine in the upcoming school year. So thanks again so much. I appreciate the transparency and look forward to it continuing.
Anyone else? Guess not. I have a motion to close public comment.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to reports to the board. We will do 1, financial reports of the board secretary, 2, treasurer's report, 3, cafeteria report, 4, approval of budget transfers, and 5, approval of bills. Can I please have a motion to approve items 1 through 5? Thank you. Second?
Second, Lauren.
Thank you. Anyone have questions or comments? Nope. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any noes, abstentions?
Stand as to 5.
Thank you. Okay, next up, nomination for board vacancy. Can I please have a motion to appoint Kathy Mullen to the Morristown Township Board of Education until the next reorganization meeting? Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I'll give board members a moment to do questions, comments, but I did want to thank all of the 13 applicants that applied for this position. We really appreciate everyone's willingness to serve, and the 5 candidates that were chosen to interview. So it was really exciting in a way to see so many people interested. And in picking Kathy, she has the experience. She was a former board member not too long ago. So she was the one that has that experience and could jump right in, has the training, has the experience, probably has some of the background checks done already. So we just wanted to, thank everyone for their willingness, and excited to hopefully have Kathy come on board with us. So I think we do need, does anyone else have any other comments that they'd like to make? Nope. Do we need a roll call vote, James?
Yes. Dr. Alberti,
Yes.
Mr. Fairchild,
Yes.
Dr. Snyder, Mr. Villanueva, Mr. Weeks, Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Romano,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Great. So thank you again to everyone who applied. We're excited to work again with Kathy. We appreciate you coming on board to help us out. I'm sure you will jump right in, which I think we had talked about. You will not be seated tonight. However, we do have some background checks. James will probably be in touch with you tomorrow, possibly, or shortly. So thank you to Kathy. Next on recommendations of the superintendent. Policies and procedures on for first reading. Then there's all these policies for second reading, policies and regulations to be abolished. Can I please have a motion to approve items 1 through 3?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any noes, abstentions? Okay, moving on to educational program. 1, special education out-of-district placements for 2021-2022. Can I please have a motion? Thank you. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any noes, abstentions? No. Moving on to the public hearing on final adoption of refunding the bond ordinance. James, do you want to make any comments regarding that before, or?
Sure. Before we make the motion for the public comment on the bond refunding, every so often we get an opportunity to refund our existing debt. This is one of those opportunities. Obviously, as many of you are aware, interest rates are pretty low right now. So we are refunding a 2012 debt issuance. The remaining amount is roughly $8.6 million on that bond. Over the remaining life of the bond, it would equate to roughly $650,000 in tax savings. So that's ultimately what we're doing here. This is a refunding of existing debt to lower our taxes ultimately.
Thank you, James. So a motion is requested to open the floor for public comment only on the bond refunding. Can I please have a motion? Second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Does anyone have a public comment just on the bond refunding? You could please come to the mic. No? Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. So we will go on to the bond refunding adoption, which I will read this motion. I recommend that the board approve the final adoption of the refunding bond ordinance of the Board of Education in the Township of Morristown in the County of Burlington, New Jersey, for the refunding of all or a portion of the outstanding callable school refunding bonds of the school district dated May 1st, 2012, issued in the original principal amount of $20,525,000, appropriating not to exceed $8,600,000. Therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $8,600,000 refunding bonds to provide for such refunding as per Exhibit 22-11. Can I please have a motion? Thank you. Second? Thanks. Anyone have any comments? No. Do we need roll call, James?
Your thoughts on that, Mr. Kemega? Absolutely.
Great.
Dr. Alberti? Mr. Fairchild?
Yes.
Dr. Snyder? Mr. Villanueva? Mr. Weeks? Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to bond form and sale resolution. So motion is, I recommend that the board approve a resolution adopting the form and sale of the refunding bond ordinance of the Board of Education of the Township of Morristown in the County of Burlington, New Jersey, for the refunding of all or a portion of the outstanding callable school refunding bonds of the school district dated May 1st, 2012, issued in the original principal amount of $20,525,000, appropriating not to exceed $8,600,000, therefore, and authorize the issuance of not to exceed $8,600,000 refunding bonds to provide for such refunding. Can I please have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All in favor? Or do we have to roll call again?
There's a typo.
Oh, questions, comments?
Yeah, just,
Oh,
I'll actually do that for you, and I'll tell you there's actually a typo in here as well. So, and that's why you have the confusion. So there's a typo in this resolution. It should say sale of the refunding bond, not ordinance. What we're doing in the second one is authorizing the documentation to go out to the public to be offering the bonds in the actual form of the actual debt instrument itself. The first one's just adopting the ordinance to authorize this to occur.
That was absolutely correct.
That sounds good. Any other questions on that? Thanks. Roll call also? Okay.
Dr. Alberti? Mr. Fairchild?
Yes.
Dr. Snyder? Mr. Villanueva? Mr. Weeks? Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to finance and business. Number 1, travel expenditures approval requests. 2, donations. 3, approval of state contract and consortium vendor purchases. 3, non-resident tuition students, 2021-2022. 5, acknowledgement of hazardous no crossroads. 6, vision care plan. 5, contract for high school copiers. 8, 2021-2022 transportation contract renewals. 9, dual use of educational space. 10, change of use of educational space. 11, alternate toilet facilities. 12, overnight student trip. 13, 2022 Every Student Succeeds Act grant application. 14, 2022 Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, IDEA grant application. 15, settlement agreement. Can I please have a motion to approve items 1 through 15? Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
I'm sorry. Just one clarifying item. Under number 12, we are going to remove the senior class trip for further discussion at our Finance and Operations Committee.
Okay,
It hasn't been reviewed yet, that's all.
okay.
My question is, was there any change to the hazardous routes, or that's just an annual approval?
That's an annual approval. Correct.
And I just had a question about the alternative toilet facilities. Is that due to increased sizes of the kindergarten classes, or is that just standard, and then we're going to have to go back and additionally possibly make changes?
Yeah, that's an annual requirement that we're
Mhm.
required to approve that due to the location of the
Right.
toilet facilities related to the kindergarten and preschool.
Anyone else have any questions? If not,
What's the change in the high school utilization of room B116?
So we brought a out-of-district program back into district, and we needed the space for that. So that space was modified to ultimately adjust for that accommodation, to bring a out-of-district program back in district.
So maybe I'll ask a different, why do we need a resolution to change the use of the space? I guess that's my question.
Because it's required by NJDOE. We have to submit it to the county for approval. We go through the whole process to change an educational space. Any of, for the public and for the board ultimately, anytime you do any sort of construction within a school building, even if it's putting up a wall, there is a very thorough process that you have to go through with the county. So ultimately, that is that process unfolding.
Correctly, it's a science lab that's being used for this multipurpose. Whatever modifications, I mean, as former science teacher, like I worry, like we're going to get rid of all the, the water and gas line, whatever might happen. Is it a flexible adjustments being made?
Absolutely. So everything, if you walked into that space, it does still look like a science space. What we are doing is taking precautions to cap off gas lines and water lines, ultimately to adjust the room accordingly. But if you walk in there, it's still the same science spaces. And if future need that to be a science space again, we can certainly go there. You're welcome.
any additional questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any noes, abstentions? Great. Moving on to employee relations. Number 1, appointments. Number 2, leave of absence. 3, change of location, FTE. 4, salary correction. 5, retirement. 6, resignations. 7, substitutes. 8, student teacher practicum students. 9, movement on the salary guide. 10, athletics. 11, extended school year staff. 12, co-curricular stipends. 13, new teacher orientation staff. 14, bus duty. 15, ESSER, ESSA summer staff. 16, administrative mentor. 17, CST summer staff. 18, 2020, 2021, adjustment to high school club. 19, high school volunteer. The personnel that we discussed in executive, that goes with the personnel as well, right, James?
Correct.
Okay.
This approval would be including the addendum discussed in executive session.
Okay, great. Can I have a motion to approve items 1 through 19?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Any questions, comments?
I just want to say that it looks good to see these normal things on the agenda, and want to extend appreciation to all the administrators and staff who, are thinking in very positive ways as we get ready for the upcoming school year, and just good to see it. I don't think it'll ever look exactly the same, but it certainly is much closer than we've been in a while. So I want to extend that appreciation.
Yes, ditto. I agree. So any other comments, questions? We're good? Okay, roll call vote?
Dr. Alberti,
Yes.
Mr. Fairchild,
Yes.
Dr. Snyder, Mr. Villanueva, Mr. Weeks, Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Romano,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Perry, thank you.
You. Suspensions and HIB report, superintendent's HIB report. Then we will go to let's, motion, please, for the HIB.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Any other no's, abstentions? Great. Then we have, I don't think any old business, I don't believe. There is new business that we discussed in executive session. Do we need, just a motion?
Yes, we would need a motion to ultimately approve the memorandum of understanding with Morristown Education Association regarding the need to have a full-time LPN nurse.
I have a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding. Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Nope. Roll call on that, James?
Yes, Dr. Alberti? Mr. Fairchild?
Yes.
Dr. Snyder? Mr. Villanueva? Mr. Weeks? Mr. Weinstein?
Abstain.
Mr. Romano?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Going to public comment. A motion is requested to open the floor for public comment. Thank you. Second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. If there's anyone that would like to public comment, please come to the mic, state your name and address.
Hi, everyone. Nicole McHenry, 3 Shelter Rock Place. I honestly had no intentions of speaking tonight, but I am here as I will continue to be. Regardless of the school plans and my upcoming school year, my family does hope to one day return to be Baker Bears. The hardest decision of our life was to pull our kids, especially my youngest ones. As I've said in many public settings, this cannot be a one-size-fits-all model with mitigation and safety strategies. This is even the case in my own home. With the help of our teachers and the child study team, we did proper evaluations of my 6-year-old daughter. The ESSR staff was great, trying to work with her this summer, giving her time maskless to learn. As parents have expressed before, they're concerned if their child is masked and others are not, it makes them the target or embarrassed. But so you know, as we've learned, it goes the same way if you're the only child that is permitted to take their mask off. With the recommendation of our pediatrician, we've reached out to other medical team members that have dealt with my daughter's condition since birth. We have already and still will continue in the upcoming weeks to see multiple specialists to narrow down what is going on. However, every single test is pointing to the same thing: hypoxia. This particular child was born with an abnormal airway that hopefully she will grow out of one day, but right now that is not the case. It's been a non-issue in the last 5 years and she's met all her milestones. However, masking her is essentially similar to masking a patient with COPD, asthma, or other breathing restrictions and diseases. I know I'm not the only parent that is dealing with this. It is beyond frustrating that our government and medical organizations are retracting peer-reviewed studies and threatening the employment and licensing of medical professionals for acknowledging that this is happening. But you need to understand it is, and if you don't believe me, do your research. It's honestly disgusting that our nation has gone in this direction, but together as a community, we could help stop this. We individually know what is best for our children. No one else knows their conditions better than their parents and guardians. To force a one-size-fits-all model is morally wrong, be it a mask or vaccines. It's dangerous, it's unethical, and it's un-American. I hope this year as a board, you take some time and reevaluate the mistakes that were made in the past. Do not take away our options of what is best for our children or our teachers and staff anymore. And in a perfect world, you would have the guts like some of the other districts in the state are doing and tell our governor no to this executive order. Or at the very least, find a way to all of these children and teachers to be unmasked while at their desk while learning until this ridiculous order is lifted. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sorry, short people problems. Okay, now it's working. Karen Vidal, 441 Oldershaw. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of a cure, and this is why we mask. We vaccinate when medically able, and utilize the layered mitigation strategies that have been proven to work. The New Jersey Department of Health and Department of Education has given us the road forward, and I want to thank the board and this administration for not wasting any time debating the document, but coming forth tonight and actually presenting with how you're going to move forward with this school year. I thank each and every one of you for your effort because this has been fantastic. As far as masking, medical mask accommodations have always been permitted. For any student seeking a medical accommodation, there are actual guidelines to follow from the New Jersey Department of Health and the CDC for proper medical documentation. Of course, I understand there will always be challenges with the little ones, whether you're adjusting a mask. We expect that. We expect the child to forget a mask. I understand that, and we understand that you've been wonderful with that. But I do think there needs to be something set and let to know to the public for a child that doesn't wear a mask, not because they're not able to, but as an act of defiance, and then what will happen in that situation. Again, I could go through examples, but I'm not, I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about there. As far as the exclusion, the one thing I will say is, unless something has changed with the road forward, from my understanding that exclusion and quarantine criteria is going to depend on the Cali. So it actually could be 10 days and it could be 14 days. Now, I sincerely hope we never get back to 14 days, but I think that more the fact that it's going to be fluctuating is something that parents need to hear. Again, I'm going to be positive and think that we can do the lowest possible, but I think that that's where a lot of confusion comes through. Again, this plan that you have is proactive from keeping students in school, and I applaud that. The last thing that we want is children on quarantine, and that's why we want this mask mandate back, and we're happy. I need you to support the information and the science, because the scientific process is not finite. When we accumulate new data, we update and adjust our conclusions, interpretations, and recommendations. It's not a sign of deception when guidance changes. Instead, it indicates that science is working, we have new information, and we're incorporating that new information in our decision-making. It's not flip-flopping, it's the scientific process working in real time. I was very happy to hear Ms. Butler talking about focusing on social emotional learning and more with mental health. Our district has excelled in our academics, and I do think that we need more on the social emotional side, so I'd like to thank you for that. I'd also like to thank everyone for tapping into a professional such as our school nurses, and would like to be able to hear from them or on the website because I know their time is precious. I'd just like to end with a final statement from former Surgeon General Dr. Jocelyn Elders. You can't educate a child who isn't healthy, and you can't keep a child healthy who isn't educated. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to speak?
Hi, Dina Hayes, 29 Apple Orchard Road. Good evening. I want to speak in reference to the safe reopening plan. I understand the governor's mandate in reference to mask wearing has put you in a difficult position. This, however, does not preclude you from standing up for our children. There are several districts already pushing back against this one-size-fits-all mandate, and I hope you will do the same. Children have been reportedly shown not to be drivers of this contagion. It is well accepted that children have a statistically 0 chance dying of COVID. Any intervention, especially one that is prophylactic, must cause less harm to the recipient than the infection. Since children have very little chance of being severely affected by the virus, the cost benefit of requiring children to wear an investigational face covering with emerging safety issues is hard to justify. Can peer-reviewed studies be provided showing wearing a mask for up to 8 hours a day is not harmful to our children? If not, then the decision must be mask optional. Where there is risk, there must be choice. Finally, I would like to end with an excerpt from a letter from a New Jersey teacher, Maria Gallagher. She said, "I have seen your kids in the classroom. They are not okay. They do care. They spent much of last year in silence. My students did not talk, ever. They did not socialize. They did not raise their hands to answer questions. It's beyond difficult to speak to a group with a mask on, and then you have to repeat it multiple times when no one can hear you. The less social kids were lost. I could see it in their eyes. They were going along with this because no one was fighting for them. No child should have to sit in a food-covered, snot-covered, soaking wet mask for 7 hours. I am fighting for your kids because it's my job to do so. So I challenge the superintendent to do the following. Instead of saying we are following a mandate, say we are not following a mandate. Your kids will have a choice. It's our duty as parents, teachers, and administrators to do what is best for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Tom Marecki, 307 Fairview in Morristown. I have a little paper here that says I actually didn't have to give you my street address, but I'm giving it to you because I want to invite you guys over and have a non-political conversation here about all this. All right? So, you know, a nice one. I had some things written down, but I'm glad you gave a little slideshow presentation here because I just made some notes off of that. Maybe you could address them. You don't have to. I just want to pull them out here. You know, your little chart, the chart there that shows cases, right? I mean, we could go back and say what the CDC said, that now the PCR tests, we can't really identify correctly if it was a flu, if it was a common cold from COVID, okay? So all these charts, you know, statistics, they help. They're there for support. And that's what they're doing. They're supporting a case. And I believe this is a political case, not real science, okay? Because we could go back and forth with that. But I understand the board has to, you know, listen to what the governor says and make their decisions based on that, and maybe not so much based on, you know, what most of us consider real science. Okay, so you have professional health officials. Right, so did you guys actually meet? I know you met with the DOH and different other professional medical officials, but was there any opposition? Did you meet with anyone in opposition to this, to these mandates, to your protocols? I'm just wondering if there was any of that, and can we see it? Is there, yeah, can we see that, or? No, I mean, actually, can we see what they said? Do you have it, like, yeah?
I'm not sure if it's publicly available or not.
Yeah.
I believe that they reported it.
Okay, so, all right, so we don't. Okay, yeah, I just want to see what that would say. So yeah, I mean, first the survey. I mean, come on, you know, Mr. Fitz, Dr. Fitz, thank you for returning my email too, and maybe setting up a meeting. I don't know how that'll go, but my issue was primarily because that survey was a little bit leading, right? I mean, you just came out and let me see where it says. Do I have that? Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I support mask being, right? That's leading us into your loaded answers options, right? I mean, I don't recommend them for anything. I don't recommend mask. And a lot of these parents here, we don't recommend or mask at all. I mean, I don't know where that comes from. And I don't know why it couldn't have just been structured like that, okay? I don't recommend masks for any reason. I don't recommend vaccination for these kids for any reason, all right? Then you have a real survey. So I'm not really sure why that wasn't put on there, but maybe, and I asked if we could actually, you know, resubmit it, you know, but I guess that wasn't taken care of. Listen, I have a 6-year-old. This mask protocol, aerobics, you know, heavy exercise, eating, back and forth. I mean, you got to admit, that's a little tough for these young children.
If you could please try to finish if you can. Your timer is up.
Oh, is it
So,
up?
yeah. I do believe you have a meeting set
Yeah.
up with Dr. Fitz, so I'm sure he'd be happy to discuss further.
Yeah, okay, well, I just want to, then I'll finalize it by saying, like, I believe you guys got to redo this whole thing. This is what my final thing was going to be. We refuse to bring our kids back with masks on. There's absolutely no reason to. This is, you found out last year what this does, okay? It doesn't work, all right? I understand about the health risks and all that. There were none. Can I see a chart up there that shows you how many of our kids were seriously ill or died last year? Can I see that chart? So just add that to your statistics and try to come up with a better plan. The plan should be, we do not return our children to this and reopen the school until we have a plan to go back to real normal, not this farce, okay? That's what I suggest. I'm sorry if I took too much time, but if we could address that, that's what I'd like to address. So let's reconvene and figure out how to tell Governor Murphy we're not going to abide by these mandates.
Thank you
We're
for your
going to
comment.
restructure something and make our own plan, okay?
Thank you
Thanks.
for your comment.
Good evening, Melissa Arcaro Burns, 8 Brooks Road. I wanted to just thank the board, the administration, the teachers for coming up with this plan. I know that it took a lot of time, and I do believe that you considered the positions of everyone in town who made them known to you. I'm really thrilled to hear that there's going to be a dedicated mental health professional. That was terrific. Sad that the ice cream social is canceled at the UES. My 4th grader was very excited. However, obviously, I understand the reasons, and I think it's terrific that Mrs. Powell is opening up the school and doing small group tours. That's wonderful for them. I do want to just thank you again for the plan, for the thoroughness of it, for presenting it the way that you did, and really working as hard as you could to make sure that our kids can return to school full-time as safely as possible. I do agree with Mrs. Macaluso that there should be more specific details related to things like mask breaks. I think it would be helpful for all the parents in the community, especially those of us who have kids in different schools, you know, because of course I'm going to run and call somebody if one of my kids comes home and says, I got a mask break now, and you know, the other one says the opposite. So I suspect that would be helpful for everyone. The one other thing I would like to see is more detail regarding what will happen if a student refuses to wear a mask, as I think it's been made clear that that will happen. I think that's important for the parents who really do support masking in school and do believe the science. I do have to say that the comment that there's a 0% chance of a child dying was shocking to me. As of August 11th, there were over 400 children that have died, and I am certain that the parents of those children would disagree wholeheartedly with that comment. There are children right now in hospitals across the country that are suffering, and some of them will die. It is not worth that risk. So again, I thank the board for this plan and for really keeping the safety of our students and our staff at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Julie Mastronardi, Morristown. There's 2 comments I'd like to make. The first is as it relates to the plan. Thank you very much for the transparency. I know this past year, the parents, us as a community, have asked for greater transparency, and it's evident that you're attempting to provide that in as much detail as you can, and we certainly appreciate that. as this year goes on and progresses, as in last year, we had a plan and it had to be fluid and you had to adapt, as did all of us. And I think the only thing that as a parent we can ask is a balanced approach. It's not an easy job to sit in your seats and try to listen to one side versus the other side and meet them halfway. So the ask is that there is a balanced approach. Clearly, there are strong feelings on both sides, and I think both sides need to be heard and adequately addressed. So as we move forward, I think if you could keep that perspective in mind, I think that would help our community as a whole to come together as opposed to being on such poles. The second thing I'd like to address is something that came about over the summer. So my son is going to UES for the first time. He was a remote student last year. And I loved the aspect of remote because I got to see and hear hands-on what he was learning and what he was reading. And this year, as in the 4th grade required reading, I'd like to read an excerpt of the book that was required. I know Dr. Fitz, several of us have emailed you about this. Bobby Jean and I tell each other almost everything, and we know things we don't tell each other too. When he wakes up after an embarrassing dream, I know about it. I see him all hunched over, shuffling off to the bathroom. In my opinion, as a parent, that is inappropriate for a 9-year-old or a 4th grader. I understand that there has been vetting that goes into it, but there are millions of amazing books out there for our children. We can do without unnecessary insinuations in the 4th grade for a 9-year-old that create difficult conversations that we as parents are not ready to have with our children. I think as a board, we ask that you protect those rights of us as parents and not take liberties that are not yours to take with our children just because you are educators of our school system. So I would love to see greater transparency into how those decisions are made and be mindful about the choices that you're making with our most precious assets, our children that we have and we guard with our lives. So thank you for your consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Okay, I'd like a motion to close public comment, please. Thank you. Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Next up for adjournment, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, David.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.